Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and I guess good evening to everybody here. My name is Brooke Taylor. I am a coach and a consultant for women-led businesses, women leaders, and entrepreneurs. I just actually started to do this full time as I've had a lot of life changes in the last few months, really, that I was speaking with Hannah about. I was at Google for 6.5 years in New York City and Ann Arbor before moving to Australia just a month ago and launching my coaching and consulting practice full time. At Google, I headed up various sales teams, and I was an account executive on a couple different large businesses in the US. And then I actually was the founding member of the Google Audience Lab. The Google Audience Lab was an immersive workshop facilitation experience that brought in Google's priority advertising clients and businesses into a very kind of cool room at Google. And we did like a full day workshop where we really used data to dive into who the audience and the ideal customer was. For these large multinational and very large national US companies. I then went on to manage that team. So I was a people manager for a bit. And then I actually moved over to the YouTube side where I ran go-to-market, a team where we actually brought YouTube ad solutions that were for performance businesses, not branding businesses. So I launched that product in the US before deciding and kind of observing in my Google world that the people that I was working with were largely men and largely people who were very much disconnected from their mission. I am very, very much like meaning, purpose, and mission driven. And I was noticing that I was helping big beer companies sell more beer to Americans and helping, big banks essentially sell more home loans and that kind of thing. And that just really wasn't lighting me up. So I really wanted to take all of the skills and all the things that I learned from my time at Google and bring it to the people who I know can do the most with it. And that's female founders and female business leaders with businesses and intent to serve. So that's really what I'm doing right now. And this webinar is just kind of an extension of that. My intention for you today is that you're going to be able to walk away with at least 2 new things that you can implement in your business. And it really just is kind of a deeper sense and sense of context and understanding around this new wave of digital marketing that we're seeing take place, because I really want to encourage you to actually ride this wave as it's coming up instead of trying to respond to the tsunami as it hits. So you probably have heard a lot of talk around audience data, and I'm going to use the word audience and customer very much interchangeably. So just be aware of that. You've probably heard a lot about audience data, machine learning, Google Ads, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. But the question is, how do you kind of make the most of it and also apply it to your small business, or your medium-sized business, whatever you're running. So again, I hope and I intend that you can actually walk away with 2 things that you're going to implement and this kind of deeper understanding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this kind of new wave of digital marketing that puts a premium on data and automation. And I'm going to give you 3 ways, or 3, I guess, surfboards for the sake of the analogy, since I'm in Australia looking at surfers out the window. 3 surfboards that you can catch so that you can actually kind of ride this wave and make the most of it. The other thing that I want to kind of clue you into is that this new wave is tipping the scales towards female founders, because the new way of digital marketing actually plays to feminine strengths. So even if you're analytical, even if you're completely right-brained or creative, there are ways for you to actually use your kind of innate feminine strengths in this era. And I want to kind of highlight that too. That's my perspective. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the context, probably for about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to go into some slides, so kind of going into those 3 ways that you can ride this wave. And then what I'll do is I'll take I have a few questions from people who have written in. If those people are not on the call, I probably won't address them now, just because everybody who tuned in, I want to get to your questions. So I'm sure I'll save at least 20 minutes of questions at the end. If there's a totally burning question that you need to ask, feel free to, but I'd prefer to kind of get through and pause for questions throughout if that works for you. Okay. So as I mentioned, today's kind of new digital marketing is very much premised on this idea that we have more data than ever before. And the reason why we have more data than ever before is because of those computers in our pockets, those smartphones, such that people no longer go online, but they live online. And companies like Google and Facebook and Instagram are capturing, quite literally, billions of audience signals or consumer signals about you and me every single second. And so as marketers, that's actually a huge opportunity for us because we have more information on who our customer is, not just on the surface level, like looking, walking down the street and saying, okay, there's a woman who looks like she has a kid and she's in her 30s, but actually psychographic, like beneath the surface. So really this new way of digital marketing is encouraging everybody to really not market based on demographics like you would with television, for example, but market based on psychographics. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story just to kind of bring this to life. Has anybody listened to the Freakonomics podcast before? I'm sure people are familiar with Freakonomics as a brand, but the podcast, one of the episodes that was a little over a year ago, the title, excuse the expletive for the kids who are on the call, I'll bleep it out. How large is my, and other questions that I ask Google. That's the name of the podcast that I encourage you guys to actually listen to. And what this social scientist saw, who was talking about kind of this Google data, was that due to social desirability bias, people lie on surveys and to each other all the time. So if I am in a social situation and people are talking about, say, like, I don't know, a baseball game that happened last night, and I am in a new situation and I don't know these people, I might nod along and like pretend that I know what I'm talking about. Or perhaps you're in a doctor's office and you're not completely honest about how many drinks you have a week or how often you smoke, something like that. That's social desirability bias. People want to be accepted, and so they're willing to lie or to stretch the truth in order to be accepted. But what is the one place where people never ever lie? That's their Google browser. People type in their real thoughts and their real feelings and their real questions into Google because they actually want real answers back. So what this means is that Google actually has more reliable data than any other source that exists out there. So again, as marketers, this is a huge opportunity for us because we now need to understand who our customer is beneath the surface in order to market to them in a personal and assistive way. Because today's consumer is more impatient, more demanding, and more curious than ever. So they're impatient because they expect their mobile site to load within 5 seconds, and if they're not, they're out. If my checkout experience on my mobile phone or even on my computer is not seamless, I will abandon it. I'm impatient as a consumer. They're more curious because Google actually saw that queries for things such as toothpaste were up 104% year over year. There is no such thing as an impulse purchase anymore. People are not just strolling down, and grabbing something off the cart anymore. They're actually researching for toothpaste, for olive oil, for detergent, all of those things. So we have all of that data where we have access to how curious these people are. And as marketers, that gives us so many more touch points to influence consideration for the customer. And then finally, they're demanding. They want what they want when they want it, and they want it now. And so what that means for us as marketers is that we're able to serve up an experience for our customer that's personal, so that speaks to our customer on the other side of the computer screen as a human being, and also in an assistive way. So it actually lends value, it's of service, and it shows the person what they're supposed to do. Let me give you another example. I'm a loyal Delta customer, and in their ads to me on Facebook, on Google, and in their email, they know that I'm loyal, and they actually show me prices for flights, not in terms of dollars, but in terms of miles, because I never pay for, because I had traveled so much for work, I never pay for a flight out of pocket anymore. I always use my miles. So the fact that Delta knows who I am, knows that I'm a valued customer, and knows that I like to shop for flights and pay for flights based on miles means a lot to me, and actually helps me do business with them, because they know it's personal, they know it's a system, and it's quick, and it's seamless, so that I can just book with miles. So while we as consumers might be a little bit disheartened that these companies are taking all of our data, the data actually shows that consumers are willing to give up this data in exchange for that personalization, in exchange for that assistance, and in exchange for that relationship. So these are kind of like the major themes that are brewing right now within digital marketing. And the reason why I really believe that this is, that we have an advantage as women, is because there's this book that's out, I don't know if anyone's read it, called A Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. And what he says is that there are kind of 6 fundamentals for people who are going to be successful in this kind of new world of automation. So because so much data crunching, because so much even advertising is automated these days, it's actually the people who are able to employ story, empathy, design, let me figure out what the rest of them are. Story, empathy, design, symphony, meaning, and play. Those are the people who are actually going to be successful. And those are actually traditionally more feminine qualities. It's a more feminine quality to empathize, to tell a story, to connect, and to serve. And so in today's digital marketing, those are the things that are actually setting brands above the rest. So I want you to think about, as I go through this and kind of give you the more tangible approaches that I will give you, but how are you going to use this kind of new wave of digital marketing to connect with your customer in a more personal way and actually serve them? And that ethos of service is something that I very much believe in my own coaching practice and in my own business practice. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a few slides. Let me just figure out how to screen share here. Okay. Okay. Hope everyone can see my screen. I assume that they can. Okay, so 3 ways to ride the wave of this new wave of digital marketing rather than responding to this tsunami. So these 3 ways, and these 3 things that I want you to kind of jot down right now if you don't already have a pen, but you need to, 1, treat your customer data as your largest asset, because it is. 2, you need to become obsessed with your different customers, and I underlined different because each customer is different and you need to acknowledge that. And 3, you need to deliver a personal and assistive experience for these different customers. These are trends that I preached for years to some of the largest companies at Google and to all of the small and medium-sized businesses that I actually worked with at Google. These 3 pillars were the tenets of the workshops that we ran at the Google Audience Lab. And I've actually kind of taken them and put them into new context for small businesses and updated a lot of the data, and also kind of put in a few stories that I've found with my own clients and in my own business. So I'll dive into those now. Ooh. So you need to treat your customer data as your largest asset, because it is. We're finding that companies that treat their customer data as a strategic asset are more profitable than those that don't. So what this means is, as I mentioned before, because there's so much audience data out there, you need to actually kind of ring fence, consolidate, and identify all of the customer data that you have access to as a step 1. So customers, as I mentioned, are willing to give up their data in exchange for a more personal experience online, knowing that means that we need to kind of take advantage of that. We need to take a look at who this audience, who these people are. And finally, and most importantly, do not play the guessing game. So many of my clients, so many of the businesses, regardless of size, make assumptions around who their audience is. They make assumptions that their audience are women, and therefore these women are interested in things like, homewares and shopping and, moving, trips, all that kind of stuff. when in fact we see that, you know, these trends these insights actually do not kind of parlay into gender lines. A lot of people assume, for example, that men are the ones that buy cars, but actually 60% of women are the people who buy cars. We also assume that, you know, gamers are children, when in fact 45% of gamers are age 40 and above. And we also assume that women are homemakers, when in fact 60% of men also engage in homeware shopping queries. So what this means to me as a data person is that we cannot rely on assumptions. And you may think you know who your audience is and what they're interested in and where they go and where they shop, but I would challenge that. Even if you've done some sort of analysis maybe a year ago, it's time to update that audience analysis. So what you need to do is consolidate and use multiple data sources in order to understand your customer beneath the surface. The big trend here is that we need to humanize digital advertising, and you need to speak to them directly and in a human way. So what I would encourage you to jot down right now is where you get a lot of your consumer data. So take a look at some of these sources here. Where are the places in which you interact with your customer, and what kind of data do you have? Is it in consumer feedback, surveys? What kind of social listening do you have? Analytics is my favorite tool, both Google, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Do you get insights from customer in the store, maybe on the phone with your support team? Do you have a CRM tool, and what kind of analytics and insights can you draw from there? So spend time either right now or perhaps with your team later, really kind of taking inventory of where your audience data sits and then taking the time to consolidate it all. So here's a checklist, and yes, I will be sending the deck out afterwards, do not worry, but here's a checklist that you can actually use in order to not play the guessing game and leverage your customer data as your largest asset. So if you don't have analytics, that's a must. You must add analytics code to your website. It's very easy to do. You can just Google it. It's quite simple. I also recommend importing all CRM data to analytics. For example, analytics has an integration with Salesforce along with other large CRMs. So you need to import those because having all your data on one platform such as analytics is extremely helpful. Then we want you to actually create audience segments within analytics. So I'll get into that a little bit more in this next section, but if you can think of it already, within analytics, it's easy to segment things like new users versus returning users, or purchasers versus non-purchasers. Start thinking as you consolidate all this data, analyze the trends and start recognizing different consumer segments, and start recognizing those attributes of those different segments. Okay, so that's step one, is treat your customer data as your largest asset, identify all the places that you have it, and pool it together. The second step is to become obsessed with your different customers and the differences in these consumer segments. So not all customers are created equal for your business, and no two humans are the same. So it's actually advantageous that we're seeing data that says that businesses who are able to acknowledge that they have different consumer segments and not create a one-size-fits-all marketing strategy, content strategy, are actually going to be the ones that succeed. So, for example, I had a question around content. I'll get to that in a bit, but this can very much play into your content strategy. So once you've identified at least two different customer segments, we want you to become obsessed with understanding their humanity. So their interests, their passions, what else they shop for, where they shop, what they watch, what they read, their habits, etc. I'm talking like stalker girlfriend status, in a legal way, of course. We want you to become obsessed with these people and understanding who they are beneath the surface. So one tip for this, if you're a small business, could be observing 15 different people, so very different people with your product or your service in their natural environment. So if, for example, you're an e-com business, Perhaps you offer, 20% off if somebody wants to get on a VC with you and open your product and try your product, get their impressions immediately. Notice those kind of like aha moments that they have. Notice those moments of kind of emotional resonance that they might have. And then ask them a little bit about themselves, not just why they purchased it, but what do they like to do? What are their habits? Where else do they shop? What else are they interested in? Because I guarantee you, these people are going to surprise you. For example, you might look at me and say that I'm like a late 20 something, early 30 something, American lady who's, interested in, tacos and travel and that kind of thing. But the truth is that I'm a huge Harry Potter nerd. I was captain of my Quidditch team in college. I am really into hard rock. And I spent $600 over the last 6 months on supplements. So that just kind of gives you a sense that the brand who actually understands all those different aspects of me and understands that I am on supplement blogs and I am watching Harry Potter videos and I am, looking for taco recipes. Those 3 distinct aspects of my personality are all 3 distinct opportunities for you as a brand to reach me. So that's why it's so important for you to understand the differences in these consumer segments and then, differences in these people, and then start segmenting them together. So I want you to identify at least 2 different consumer segments. That could be new users, so people who are just coming to your website, for example, versus repeat purchasers. So what are the differences in those 2 people? People have just come to your website. You can analyze that in analytics, and I'll show you that in a second. And what's the difference between somebody who comes to your website and doesn't purchase versus somebody who comes to your website and purchases? We're more curious about the person who comes to your website and purchases because they probably have friends who are similar to them, and we want to go out and target using Google Ads and Facebook and Instagram, people who are similar to that. Additionally, perhaps you say that your target market is women, agnostic of their parental status or their age or anything like that. I would encourage you to think of it as to drill down a little deeper and analyze patterns to segment people out, such as moms with young kids, adult professional women, and then perhaps aspiring professionals, because these 3 segments are going to have different interests, different wants and needs, and they're going to be at different places in their consumer journey. So again, use data and become obsessed with your customer. So here are some ways that you can do this. Obviously, analytics is my favorite, but I'm not just biased. It actually has a lot of great information. So within this analytics report, you can see on the left-hand side, it says audiences, and then we're in the interests section here, and we're looking at overview. So what this report tells us is of all sessions, so all people who've been to your website, this is all people who've been to your website, regardless of if they've purchased or not. These people have an affinity for, so meaning they're interested in home decor, tech, movies, travel, etc. Now on the right-hand side, these people are in market, meaning they're actively trying to purchase home and garden and home furnishings, home decor. They're looking to buy a hotel room, and they're looking for employment. So again, the difference here is that on the left, the affinity, that's people who are interested in things. So perhaps they're searching and digesting and all of that kind of stuff, and they're digesting a lot of content around these topics. But the in-market segment is people who are actually looking to purchase, so they're lower funnel. Now, the brilliant part about this report is that all of these affinity segments and all these in-market segments are actually ways that you can target individuals on Google. So you can go into your Google Ads and you can actually choose, I want to go now target people who are in market for home furnishings and people who are in market for home decor, because I know people who come to my website are also in market for those things. So I'm going to go out and find more people who are also in market for those things because those could be my potential customers. So I know this is like a quick and dirty overview of this. I'm happy to answer questions on this in a bit, but I want to show you what it looks like in Facebook. So Facebook also has audience insights. You can browse based on their demographic, their location, what pages they've liked, their activity, so meaning like how often they log in, their household income, what else they've purchased, all of that. So these are all free tools, and it's all data that can come from your Facebook page, from your Google ads, and also just from your organic, as long as you have the code in your website. So this is all free information. And again, it helps you to actually use data to validate who your customer is. So here's a bit of a checklist. Again, I'm sending the deck, so no fret, but I want you to spend some time to analyze your audience data. So step 1. Step 2, take a look at the commonalities and who these audience segments are. And I want you to actually name these different customers, and I want you to know each intimately. And this is not the same as doing your kind of business plan, audience avatar, ideal customer. I want you to write out at least 10 different facts that you know about these people. Then I want you to create an integrated digital consumer journey for each of these people. So how do moms shop on your website versus adult professionals? What are they interested in, and what are those kind of ideal touch points digitally that you can influence their consideration? I want you to know what value they drive for your business, and I want you to know the cost per acquisition for each. So, for example, perhaps moms tend to buy more because they buy some for their friends, or they buy more for their husbands or something like that, versus young professional women who only purchase once. These are the idiosyncrasies of your audience strategy that will help you make a more informed and ROI-driven decision around who you're actually targeting and what value you place on them. Okay, and third, my favorite. Now that you've identified your customer and your various segments, you need to talk to them differently. You need to deliver a personal and assistive experience for each one of these customer segments. So we're finding that customers expect to be spoken to personally by brands, yet only 1/3 of brands are doing it. So what this means to me is that this is a huge opportunity for you as small businesses to kind of have this ethos embedded in your business and to actually take advantage of this, because as we know, today's digital environment is more noisy and more competitive than ever. So actually speaking to the human being behind the screen personally and saying, hey, I know who you are and I can empathize with you, and actually telling them a story. So back to those 6 pillars again that women are really good at. That's going to help you market smarter, not harder, and it's going to help you take advantage of this new wave of digital advertising in a way that's advantageous for you as a business, but also assistive to your customer. Because the day of one and done transactions is over. I never want to see somebody coming to your website and bouncing off without you collecting data on them. That is a missed opportunity, because every single person who comes to your website, you have an opportunity to build a relationship with them. So what that means is I want you to think of moving beyond transactions to actually fostering relationships. That's what's an absolute no-brainer to me is anytime somebody's purchased with you, you must understand who they are and actually continue to foster that relationship. And you can actually do that through things like remarketing, which I'll get into it in a bit, and through those audience targeting, those in-market and affinity segments that I talked to you about. But remarketing is very much the best way for you to continue to foster that relationship. Then we want you to speak directly to them and connect with them personally. And this should inform your advertising copy and your content strategy across all platforms. So somebody asked me about email strategy. This can be applied there too. Perhaps you have 2 different email lists, purchasers and people who haven't purchased before, or clients who you're currently working with versus clients who have lapsed, or perhaps people who have signed up for your newsletter and don't really know you versus people who have worked with you. You might want to give them different information. So it really is, it's very much, and this kind of ethos and this strategy can apply to both your targeting strategy within advertising, but also your copy and your content strategy across platforms. And finally, as you know, today's curious, demanding, and impatient consumer is actually expecting this, and your competitors are beginning to do it. So the more you can kind of build your business around these guidelines, the better off you're going to be. So here are a couple, there's a checklist for you to use. Pixel your website for remarketing. So I'll just pause and just describe what remarketing is for a second. Has anyone ever been to Nordstrom's and clicked on a gorgeous pair of boots, and those boots have just followed you around the internet, and you have succumbed to the pressure and purchased the boots because they're so cute and you see them everywhere? Asking for a friend. I have done that multiple times. Remarketing is the ability for a company to actually pixel somebody who's been to their website before and serve them an ad based on the action that they took on your website. So for example, if somebody's come to your website, maybe viewed 2 pages and then dropped off, you could show them an ad that said, across the internet, so across the display network or across Facebook, you could show them an ad that said, hey, remember us? We saw that you were browsing, come back for 10% off your next purchase. And that would be a different strategy than, say, somebody who's come to your website, perhaps started to fill out an interest form and then abandoned the form. That you would want to come back and say, hey, I'm going to offer you, like maybe a free consultation, or, sign up now or finish your sign up to come back and, have the free call, something like that. Again, this is evidencing how you want to treat those customers differently and deliver a personal experience with them online. And a remarketing is a really great way to do it. This is a paid service that can be done both on Facebook, Instagram, and Google. And of course, it's a great way to cross-sell and upsell, as I just mentioned. It's a great way to speak to them personally, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, again, in the way that we as women are really good at. It's another offer and another way for you to serve them and add value at every single touch point, because today's consumer is inundated with information and they're impatient and they're demanding. You need to be there, you need to be brief, and you need to be valuable. Those are the 3 pillars. Be there, be brief, be valuable. So be where your customers are, be brief. So, don't bury the lead, and then be valuable. Lead with value, lead with service. And that can be at every single touch point. That's really valuable from email marketing to video marketing to Instagram ads, Facebook, all of that. Use storytelling to deliver your message. That can be done very well on video. By this year, 80% of digital content will be digested on a video platform. So if you're not doing video, I would recommend having that on your roadmap for your business this year. It's very much, this wave has kind of already hit. So what the trends that I'm talking to you about right now are coming, and they're about to kind of crash down, but the video wave has already crashed. So I would recommend you get on that like yesterday. And then finally, once you have more information about who your customer is, this can, of course, inform your product design strategy and your product roadmap. So how can you be more valuable and create a more empathetic product or a service based on your customer feedback? So this idea of putting the human being at the center of our business strategy is kind of a strategy that I know is here to stay, and it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. So I know that any one of these strategies that you employ will very much be worth their weight on gold, not from just a marketing perspective, but also from a business development and a product design perspective. Okay, time to work. So I want you to, if you've taken notes, write down or circle at least 2 things that you actually plan to implement in your business. So perhaps you've like dotted and squared and underlined things. I want you to just kind of highlight or write down just 2 of those things that you actually want to implement. So maybe that's put analytics code on your website, or look into setting up a remarketing campaign, or have a meeting with your team about pooling all that audience data. So just choose 2 of those. And then after you've done that, I want you just to write down the next right step, or the next step that you can put into motion after this webinar. So I don't want you to go be like, there's so many things that I need to do, and how am I going to get it all done? Trust me, I know that stress from all the clients that I've worked with, and then even in my own business, I'm in the midst of taking my own advice, because I just, I'm rebranding my website and creating my content strategy and doing this audience analysis myself. And it can feel overwhelming. So I just want you to write down the next right action. So maybe it's email your web person and ask them to put this analytics code up, or, send an email and ask for the meeting where we can pull all the audience resources, or go into your calendar and just add in 30 minutes. So just do that now. And then if you're interested, and if you find that this is very interesting, I'm happy to help you if you want to learn more. I am a business coach, so this is the kind of stuff that I walk my clients through and hold their hands through. And then I of course rely on my own business acumen, but also I'm a trained coach, and I do a lot of the motivational and the mindset work. So if you feel like you need help with any of those things, or if that's interesting to you, feel free to send me an email. I'm Brooke at brooketaylorcoaching.com. As I mentioned, my website's going through a redesign, so it is up, but it is not optimal right now. So feel free to send me an email. So with that, I think I'll go. I started adding some resources here. I have a few more to add, so I'll send the deck, and then you'll have these resources. And then I also had this, just this funnel that kind of outlines all the different marketing strategies that line up with the different targeting options. So with that, I think I'll stop the share and just kind of turn it over to questions here. I'll take one question live, and then I'll go to the questions that I had that were submitted. Any questions? Okay, well, I know Catherine's on the call and she had a question.
It looks like there was actually a question. What's the best way to figure out who your customer is if you're a startup and have not launched yet?
Great question. So I would take some time to write down first of all, who your ideal customer is, and get to know them very well. Perhaps if you have an idea of who this person is, maybe it's a friend or maybe it's somebody you know, go and interview them. I actually have a worksheet that asks I think 30 questions of somebody, and you can go and ask, and you can actually have them fill out this questionnaire, and that will give you a really good idea of what they're like, again, beneath the surface. And then I would test and iterate from there. I'm guessing that your target market might change and will change a few different times. So start, building a service for this person, knowing what you know about them from this exercise, from interviewing them, and then kind of see what resonates and kind of test and iterate from there. I would also, of course, recommend putting analytics on your website as soon as possible, and start collecting data from there. Thanks, Alicia. Okay. Google ads or Facebook ads, where should I start as a small business? So my recommendation is actually always to start with Instagram ads. And the reason for that is that they're cheaper. And I think that their targeting is pretty specific, focused, and refined for a small business. So once you know who your client is or who your ideal customer is, you're able to actually go in and find those different targeting aspects. So say, for example, you know that people are like the outdoors. They're also interested in decorating their home. You can actually go into the Facebook or the Instagram or the Google interface and target those types of people. So I always recommend starting with Instagram. And I recommend having one lump sum test budget that you just kind of run a bit of a sprint with. So say, for example, you have $5,000. I recommend using that at least $2,000 of that within 2 weeks to really get enough data back on what works and what doesn't, and then test and iterate from there. So again, I would recommend just a few grand within the first few weeks to get enough data back, and then you can kind of see what's resonating, what's not, what kind of audience targeting has a higher engagement rate than others, and then you can start funneling your money there. Okay, I work in content marketing, and I'm curious to find out more about what you learned at Google. So I think I shared a little bit more about what I think about content and how you should be speaking specifically to these people. At Google, especially in YouTube, we had a few pillars of content strategy. I mentioned about be there, be brief, and be valuable. But also, we found that video content that did one of three things really well tended to succeed. They were either educational, inspirational, or entertaining. So we don't want to make them laugh, cry, and learn all at the same time. So I'd recommend kind of going deep into one for each video. But we want to entertain, we want to inspire, and we want to educate at least once within every single video we create. Another question that I got here, aside from IG, Facebook, Twitter, what other great channels to engage and acquire new potential customers? I'm saying YouTube and video 100%. People at Google and people who are YouTubers and people who have their kind of pulse on digital marketing will be as bold as to say, if your business doesn't have presence on YouTube, you're culturally irrelevant. I don't know if that's, I don't know if I believe that 100%, because I don't want to guilt trip anyone into creating a YouTube channel. But if you have the means and you have the ability, and that's on your roadmap for this year, then I would really recommend investing in YouTube content to perhaps showcase your work, perhaps create an educational opportunity for your client. Thought leaders create content, and so if you're trying to be a thought leader in the space, you must be creating content. And where are people digesting content? It's on video. Okay. Any questions from the room before I keep going? Okay. What are the best performance strategies for a business or brand in general when it comes to social media? I don't know about organic social media per se, although that pillar that I just mentioned, thought leaders create content. I'd recommend just creating original content as much as you can and getting your perspective out there. When it comes to social media marketing, performance strategies, remarketing, as I mentioned, and in-market audiences are your best bet. So don't just market with demographics. So not just like women ages 25 to 34 in New York City. That is not enough. We want women ages 25 to 34 in New York City who are in market for, homeware and have an interest in politics. Like those are the types of refined psychographics that we want to be targeting on, not demographics. How should a business send out marketing emails or news to subscribers? No rule here, I would say, but whatever you do, be consistent. So if you're going to send out an email once a week, do it every week on Monday and make that, part of your strategy. Speak personally to that person and add value every single time. Do not just say, here's what I'm up to and here's what I learned. Put your insights at the top. Do not bury the lead because people do not have that much time. The reason I like email marketing is because you're not reliant on anybody else's algorithm and you can speak directly to people. So this is a really great channel to nurture. However, I'd say with content, you got to be valuable and you got to be consistent. Okay, how to engage people when you're trying to change cultural narratives, not just sell people on the current paradigm. So that's really interesting. I would say, again, identify who it is, like what choir are you preaching to? Who is that person? And I would start with the choir. I'd start preaching to the choir first, and then allow for people to kind of come and listen to your message if they're open to it. I think from a marketing perspective, it's all going to be based on your content strategy. So what new information are you sharing with them? Are you inviting people into engage in the conversation? So inviting people to comment, to reply. Are you replying as well, perhaps on your Instagram posts or in your emails? From a paid perspective, I've only seen very large PR efforts trying to change cultural narratives. So that's like, I've seen oh my gosh, one of my clients once was a company that was responsible for putting a lot of GMOs in products and having a lot of terrible environmental policies. And so essentially all they did on YouTube was running ads that kind of changed the narrative around their public relations policy. So they kind of targeted not environmentalists. They didn't go actually after the people who were their enemy, but rather they just kind of spread the message to people in key areas. So I thought that was interesting. So I've kind of seen the opposite of that. But if whoever wrote this question wants to talk to me afterwards, we could maybe dive into your strategy a little bit more because it's not as cut and dry. Is Maria on the call? Yes, Maria is on the call. Hi, Maria. You had a question about A/B testing. Let me quick find it. Okay. I will soon be launching a few landing pages for a product I'm developing and would like to A/B test them against each other by having people find them via targeted ads. How do I do that? What's the process? What do I need to have in place? So A/B testing is what she's talking about is actually going into Google Ads and market testing one ad creative with one landing page and its performance versus another ad creative and its landing page against its performance. This is done via drafts and experiments in the Google Ads interface. You can Google it and find out how to set it up. This is one of the best ways to market test, is through this A/B testing of drafts and experiments. It's probably the most statistically significant. Another good way to do it would be to run one ad in one market and another ad in another market that's pretty similar to it. And you can compare the results that way. So you could do a split market test. And then a final way to do it, and I don't know if you have brand goals, but Google and YouTube have a really excellent research product called the brand study. So it requires you to have video content, of course, and you can actually market test a video creative within a certain demographic, and you can get results back such as brand awareness, brand favorability, purchase consideration, what kind of impact did it have on search uplift, and purchase intent. So that's really, really, really powerful data that you would spend tens of thousands of dollars with. Whoa, sorry. That's my buzzer. That you would spend tens of thousands of dollars with like a Nielsen or something on. So if you want to run a Google brand lift study, there is a minimum requirement, and I think it's about $5,000 within, I think, 7 days. But again, that data is kind of invaluable. So I'm happy to talk to you more about the Google brand lift study afterwards. You asked about questions in terms of who should I target and how do you do that and what's the process. I think I went into that pretty in depth throughout this conversation. But Maria, do you still have questions based on that?
Sorry, I was like on mute and like not on video because I was in motion. But no, this is super helpful. Thank you so much, Brooke. This was invaluable. Thank you so much for the generous offer. You actually covered a ton of the questions that I had up front. So thank you.
I'm so glad. And I'm happy to chat A/B testing with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else? No question is too small. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your businesses, even if you want to talk about them and ask my perspective on what kind of marketing mix you should have or anything.
Actually, if it's not too much trouble, I'd love to maybe follow up with one question. So if I decide to launch multiple landing pages, is it smarter to start with the kind of traditional A/B test, so same target audience, two different landing pages, or is it smarter to do the split market approach, which you just talked about?
I would use the A/B test in drafts and experiments just to make sure it's as statistically significant as possible. And yeah, I guess it will also depend on, actually a budget shouldn't be a factor here, but it might impact the length of time that it needs to go and needs to run in order to get the right feedback. So budget might be a factor there. So, I would look into that.
So like if it runs for longer, obviously the budget goes up, and how long would it have to run for from your experience to be statistically relevant?
At 2 weeks.
At least 2 weeks. Okay, got it.
And that's the case for any digital marketing strategy. Anytime you're about to do something, a digital test, or even just launch any sort of ads, minimum 2 weeks in order to get enough data back.
Got it. Okay. Helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Catherine, I know you're on mute, but you had a few questions. I don't know if you had any follow-ups you can chat in. Lauren and her children, any questions?
It's like, sorry, Catherine says, to your comment before about YouTube being a place to post or create content, what's the best way to gather info to determine what audiences would want to see the most?
That's a great question. I think there are a couple external tools around YouTube Audience Finder. I'm gonna have to dig those up, but there's an internal tool at Google where you can put in the demographics and it'll spit out, what else they're interested in. But I don't know if that's external or not. I might have to do some sleuthing to see if there is an external tool. But what's the best way to gather info to determine what audiences would most want to see? I would also just ask your audience. If you have an email list, or if you even just have 15 customers and you want to send them an email and just say, hey, what keeps you up at night? What are you most interested in learning about in this topic? What are things that are, that you'd love to tune in on? What's something that I do really well that you think the rest of the world would benefit from? So just asking directly is probably your best bet. Otherwise, I can do some sleuthing and try to get back to you on that YouTube tool if there's something external. Okay, I'll pause for any other question. Oh, we had one more question here. Okay. How does business coaching work, and how do you use your experience at Google to bring business coaching to life? So to me, business coaching is valuable because if you're trying to get to the Olympics, you want somebody who's been to the Olympics to go alongside with you and to train with you and to show you how it's done. I personally wouldn't dream of launching a business without somebody by my side helping me and holding me accountable. I feel like that's my perspective of launching a business. I want somebody who can actually see me and see my product from a third-party perspective clearly and kind of expose me to different blind spots. It really helps, if you're doing any sort of SWOT analysis with your business and you have, either weaknesses or threats, having that third party kind of brainstorming on how to combat those, and then really setting your foundation from the ground up, making sure that you've done all these things that I've talked about in a really kind of succinct and intelligent way will make sure that you've set your business up for success. So that's how business coaching works. I'm happy to, I don't want to talk too much about that because it feels a little self-serving, but that's what it is. So it sounds like there are not any other questions, but did we want to do a round of intros, Hannah?
Yes, that would be great. If anyone has time to stick around for an extra 5 minutes, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and what you're working on, it's a great way for us to all get to know each other. So I can go first. I'm Hannah. I work on the Dreamers Doers membership support team. So I'm basically just here for whatever you need, whether that's, in the groups, email, things like this. So yeah, I'm just here for you. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I have a 9-to-5 at Citibank doing kind of strategy and innovation for our digital group. I also run a nonprofit organization called WIN, Women in Innovation, which helps to advance women through very action-oriented monthly programming. And then I have just very recently embarked on this new journey of mine, which is essentially trying to create the general assembly for relationship skills. So bringing down the barrier to entry into what traditionally would be considered couples therapy in a more fun, cool, pragmatic, practical, but also perhaps whimsical way. And I've run my first prototype just 2 weeks ago, and I'll be running some more end of April. And hence, I wanted some guidance and advice on how I can start marketing this beyond family and friends.
Great.
Amazing.
That's
Thank
really
you so much for
interesting.
sharing. Alicia, are you mic'd up?
Yeah, so I'm working on a startup within the personal care industry. So it's called Outlier, very, very early stages right now, still doing product development. And essentially, we're going after minorities and women of color that haven't been addressed in terms of their skincare issues and the unsexy categories of the beauty segment that hasn't been addressed either. So starting by focusing on the armpits, so doing natural deodorant, in addition to an armpit brightening cream, which deals with hyperpigmentation and ingrown hair.
Very cool. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Sorry. Josephine, are you available to speak?
Sorry. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Alicia. Good to see you. I have an immersive and experiential events company, so I specialize in retreats and do community events in New York. Prior to launching this venture, I was a professional matchmaker, so I use a lot of that sensibility in terms of thoughtful connection making, psychology, taking a lot of considerations and how I create these moments and experiences. So they're highly curated. Oftentimes they're, invite only, and yeah, that's what it is.
So awesome.
Great, I think that's everyone. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Brooke. This was amazing. And
Good.
so much good stuff. I can't wait to go back through the slides and everything.
Yes, thank you, Brooke. This was super, super valuable.
I'm so glad to hear that. I'll send Hank the deck and she can distribute it. And please follow up with me on anything.
Amazing. Thanks again. Enjoy your
you.
Australian weather.
Well,
Bye. Bye.
Take care.